Welcome to Audacity Works, a podcast inspired by and dedicated to the working artist, the creative entrepreneur, and generally, doing the damn thing. This exists on the premise that the world belongs to those who have the audacity to believe that their lives have value. This is for you. Welcome to Audacity Works. I'm your host, Rachel Strickland, and this is episode number 94. We're getting on up there, good people. We're getting up there. Speaking of which, one of you wrote in and suggested a cool idea for me for the 100th episode, and I can't remember who it was. It was about getting something from alumni, and I don't remember who wrote me. I'm going to blame jet lag for that, but if it's you and you're listening to this, will you please write to me again? Because I have looked through my messages on every platform looking for you so that I can credit you. And I can't find you. Forgive me. Please just tell me who you are. In other news, it's hot as balls outside because it's August in coastal South Carolina. And as oppressive as it can be, you know I love that swampy, wet heat. I just love it. And even though you can't necessarily stay outside for that long without risking dehydration, every time I walk outside and I feel that wet hug around me, I know that soon it's going to be taken away again and be replaced with the awful cold. So I'm just trying to enjoy as many of these heat hugs as I can, as often as I can. That's the magic of seasonality. If you don't like your current circumstances, you can just wait it out because they're going to change in some way or another. That's just the nature of being alive. But also, if you don't like your current circumstances, you could probably change them faster than the natural world would. Tiny update, we are approaching September, which means that soon the season of enrolling the next cycle of the Audacity Project will be upon us. And as such, I am going to start loving on my wait list here very soon. If you're curious about the Audacity Project, if you want to know how it works, what you might get out of it, how much it costs, the waitlist is definitely the place to be. Plus, you get like a little bit of a discount and you get a lot of love leading up to the enrollment, and you get early enrollment so that you're sure to get a spot. So I'll put that link in the show notes. The good stuff starts coming out this week. So on to the meat of the episode, which I have not even announced yet. This is episode 94, and it is by request. My friend MM wrote in that she had something on her mind lately, which is the boundaries between her online self and her in-person self, especially because she was becoming and is becoming more known in her community, specifically the circus or performing arts communities. So let's talk about that. How do you know that you have healthy boundaries in place when you start gaining some name recognition? I have talked about this briefly before, but that was like a year ago. So saying it once is saying it never. Maestro taught me that, and it is accurate. Let's talk about it some more. I want to start with a little throwback here, okay? The year was 2002, maybe. I think I was 20 years old. And I had saved up enough money. I was in college and I had no money, which is the college way. And me and my best friend, Christy Acee, we wanted to go out to dinner. And to go out to dinner, which was Outback, obviously, like that was the place that we went out to dinner. And we'd have to save up for a couple of weeks to be able to afford it. So we saved up, we went to Outback, we got the Alice Springs chicken, which is the tits, by the way. If you're a meat eater and you're forced to go to Outback, I'd recommend that dish. And the Alice Springs chicken comes with a sweet potato. And we were sitting and having dinner and talking earnestly about our lives, as we tended and still tend to do with each other. And we got really serious for a second because we were talking about being authentic to ourselves. And at the time we were very young women. You know, we didn't have yet the freedom to actually be ourselves in lots of places. We were still masking a great deal in a large portion of our lives. We didn't have a lot of personal security In what way do I mean? Pick one. Mostly, I think we were just trying to feel safe and secure. And at that time, our method for doing that was fitting into whatever other people's expectations of us were so that they would like us and even love us and accept us as part of the tribe. Right? Tale as old as time. But I think we were both already getting pretty tired of it. And also, we'd had a beer. So we decided to make a pact right there at the dinner table in Outback Steakhouse, which was to always, always be true to ourselves. And Chrissy plopped some hot sweet potato on her right palm. So I did the same thing. And we're like, shake on it? Yeah, and we shook on it and we squished that fucking sweet potato between our hands. And we called it the sweet potato swear. And we have referenced the sweet potato swear for 22 years since that day. There was a caveat to the sweet potato swear, which is we were 20, and you'll see why. Because we were like, yes, we're going to be true to ourselves. We're going to be authentically ourselves at all times. Oh, except for at work. At work, it's okay to fake it and to be, to mask for protection. And we both agreed with that sentiment at the time. We're like, okay, so except for at work, we're going to be authentically ourselves. I hereby, and as of today, and actually many, many, many days ago, I renounce that caveat to the sweet potato swear. Absolutely not. Immediately no. Of course, I was 20. I didn't know this yet. But I was 20 and I was scared, and so was she, and we were just trying to be safe and to survive. I forgive us for creating that disclaimer, even though I now reject it wholeheartedly. Because I think you should be yourself at work. Why? What kind of life is that? Do you know how much of our time we spend working? Like most of the time that we're awake, anyway, that is spent at work. So you want to spend most of your life masking and pretending to... No. I take it back. I renounce it. And this is how this ties into this episode. Boundaries between our online selves and our real selves. I don't really have any. What you're hearing right now, this is exactly how I talk. Honestly, there are breaks in between. Sometimes I have to think about what to say next, so I push the pause button. But other than that, this is just how I talk. I'm even using my hands while I'm talking right now. The way I show up online is the way I am as a person, because who has the time to pretend to be someone else for most of the time that you're awake and interacting with the world at large? But I don't even think that that's what MM meant, because she's like, I know her and she's very good at being authentically herself. But let's pretend for a second that she isn't. And this wanting to draw a line between your professional persona and who you actually are could have any kind of benefit. That kind of benefit, I assume, is this quote unquote professionalism that I see being touted, especially in online coaching spaces. Y'all, nothing makes me roll my eyes more than the word professionalism most of the time, because of the way that it's meant. Like, you want to sound professional. Why? I disagree. I think you want to sound like you know what the fuck you're talking about, but using sterilized language doesn't make you sound like you know what you're talking about. It makes you sound like you have a stick up your ass. Doing things correctly, that's also in big air quotes, by the way, doesn't get you work. Relationships get you work, and relationships aren't formed with a robot. Don't get me started. They're formed with people like other people. And if someone doesn't like you when you're being yourself, then what? You don't want to work with them anyway. That's going to suck. That's not going to be a good relationship. There are billions of other people that you could choose to work with. I understand that I have this viewpoint because I've had the privilege to have the role models that I have had. Women who were founders and CEOs of their own companies, international performing troupes, grant writers, personal trainers, women who I saw create the world around them and drew me like a magnet into their orbit, because I was like, yes, I want to be like you. You're my people. I would not have felt that way if they had scrubbed themselves of every perceived flaw. Here's one of my most colorful examples. Okay, this is the day that I met Chantal McCormick. We were in Grannon Theater, unpacking the rigging for like the second annual Irish Aerial Dance Festival. And we had just met, we had spoken online, but we had just met for the first time in real life. And something had gone wrong with an order of some rigging. And she was talking to like the three of us that were there in the theater. And she's like, the cunts fucked up the order. That was one of the first sentences that I heard her utter out loud. And I think I just fell instantly in love. Not because it was vulgar, but because it was honest. And she wasn't trying to put on some kind of face. She was literally just carrying on with her life and being herself. And I had chosen to come into that orbit. And I'm like, this is so good. I can be myself in this space. And that was that. So there's my long-winded condemnation of professionalism. I think professional means you get paid for your work. That's it. It doesn't mean that you act right. You can talk about professionalism in that context, but I think it's often taken out of context in a way that suppresses people. And that's what I don't get on board with. That's part of why I allow myself to curse whenever I want to on my own podcast and in the online space. Because if someone doesn't like cursing, you're not going to like being around me. I enjoy it. And in this way, it kind of vets my audience. I'm not going to change. If I hurt someone, I'd like them to tell me so I can take responsibility for that. But I'm not going to change a fundamental part about myself. There are like billions of other people who could maybe be more your flavor. I don't know. But like I said, the original asker, she knows how to be authentic. So I think the real meat of this question is not boundaries between like who you portray yourself to be in your working life versus who you actually are. I think it's more about just having boundaries around the online space when that's helpful for you, especially as you achieve some name recognition, because people be writing you, and that's good. That's great. You should respond to the people. Business is made on relationships. Careers are made on relationships. But if you are getting a ding on your phone every time someone sends you a DM on Instagram, you need to sort your shit out, because you're not going to be able to have any peace in your life, especially once you start having some success. So boundaries around the online space. 1, turn off all your notifications. I'm going to assume that most of you are doing this already, but if you're not, just pause this podcast, pause it right now. Go turn off your notifications. You don't need to know when someone has liked your post on Instagram or Facebook or TikTok or whatever the hell we're using these days. You don't need to know that in the moment. You don't. Check your messages when you feel like checking your messages and when you have time to reply to them. Otherwise, it's just going to drain. Just going to open the little plug at the bottom of your skull and drain all of your life force down into the world. And you need that life force. So turn off your notifications. You can take possession of your relationship with the online space, but it does take, it takes a kind of a strength of character, because it's so fun when someone's reaching out to you. It's fun to be asked questions. It's fun to interact with people who like what you're putting out into the world. And it's hard to say no to, but you don't need to do it in real time. You decide when you're going to check those messages. You decide when you're going to respond to your DMs. I think the whole root of this really boils down to perfectionism, which is not being allowed to make a mistake, or believing that we're not allowed to make a mistake and that we need to be perceived as having all the answers, which is, of course, impossible. And the thing is, it's easy when no one knows who you are. I remember the first like 5 years, I was writing a blog and I wrote it under the name Madam Rex. And like my 5 friends in college read that blog. That's all. And it was great. I was completely myself. I never held anything back. I divulged everything. And I never gave it a second thought because I knew who was reading it. It was my 5 friends. Later on, I got a Facebook page, started performing. More people started following me. My audience grew, and then it grew. And then a blog post that I wrote went viral. and my audience quadrupled overnight. And guess what happened after that? I didn't say a damn thing for weeks because suddenly there were all these strangers staring at me, and I was like, I don't know what to do. This is so many more people than there had been people before. And it wasn't that I didn't want to say the wrong thing. It's that I felt like, well, the next thing I have to say, it's got to be better than the thing that just went viral. And of course, that was a terrible perspective to adopt on myself, because then I just said nothing for weeks. I didn't post anything. I didn't write anything. It was just completely suppressive. That was perfectionism. I was not allowing myself to be imperfect, thinking I had to best my old self. It's just, I hate it. Honestly, I think you should make good content. I think that you should be proud of the things that you're putting out into the world. But honestly, make a mess. Please be willing to make a mess. Otherwise, you're not going to put good things out into the world. You're not going to put anything out into the world. And you can feel like super confident in that answer. Like I feel right now, I feel completely confident in everything I just said. If something that I made today went viral and my audience quadrupled from what it is now overnight, I'd need a minute. I don't think that I would stop creating. I think at 42, I have what it takes to push through that and just make a mess anyway, even with all the new eyeballs. But I'm not saying that I wouldn't need a second to process that. The stakes just seem so much higher when you have more eyeballs on you. All right, friends, I'm looking at the time. We are right up to the money here. So I wanted to say thank you for listening. And thank you for tuning in. There's so many things that you could do with your day, and you choose to do this, and I don't take that for granted. To that end, if you have requests for future episodes that you'd like to hear about, you can always reach me on Instagram at Rachel Strickland Creative or on Patreon at Rachel Strickland Creative. Would love to hear from you. Love hearing from you. Without you, I'm just someone talking to myself in my office for 20 minutes a week and then editing it for no reason. So thank you for being here. This podcast is powered by Patreon, and I want to give an extra warm shout out to my patrons. There are 157 of you at this very moment, and that just floors me. I don't talk about the podcast on the Patreon because the podcast is here to talk about itself. The Patreon is where we talk about everything else and the work that I'm making and how they are absolutely the world's best enablers. Thank you for standing with me. So that's it from me today, my friends. Thank you for being here, and you just, be you online, be you offline, and everyone else can sort themselves out. Okay? Don't go back to sleep.